Welcome to part 6 of this course, which is called Master Excel Formulas, Make the Leap to the Next Level. This is the second to last part, of course. And as usual, we will start with a small dose of motivation. Today's quote of the day is, "Each step you take reveals a new horizon. You have already taken many steps, and now I challenge you to take another." I decided to include this quote here because it fits my view of the world and of life as well, and I really hope that obviously it can provide you with some extra bit of motivation. Okay, now starting with the first formula for today. That is the search formula. Search is a function that returns the location of a text in a string. So if you probably remember that we already discussed a function that is similar to this, that is obviously the find function. Okay, so that's why I have written here, I have obviously put a question: what is the difference between find and search? We will go through that as well, but before that I just wanted to go through the structure of the search function as well. Okay, so first of all we need to specify the text that we want to find, then within what text we need to find it, so that's obviously our string, and the optional thing here is the starting number or starting position as well. Okay, now let me give you an example here as well. And now as you can see here, I have provided an example where we have all the different things within the structure of the search formula and within the structure of the find formula, and these are obviously the find text, within text, and the optional start number or starting position. Okay, now let's try and first of all do something without the option, just type in the formulas without the optional argument here. Okay, so if I start with find, and then obviously we need to find a within here. Okay, and then just do this. Okay, so you can see the find formula tells us that a can be found in the first position, or that's the first character of the word apple. Okay, so search will basically give us the same thing really, and the same outcome. Okay, so here there's no difference. Okay, so we have a capital letter, and the capital letter here is obviously A as well. Right, now let's go to the second example here. Okay, so now we have a capital P, and we need to find that within the word apple. Okay, now we just go and type the formulas again. Okay, and we start position 1 this time, and as you can see we have occurred an error using the find formula. Okay, let's see what the search function will give us as an outcome here. So you can see that the search formula gives us 2 as the outcome here. Okay, which basically means that the first time the search formula finds a P within the word apple is in second position. Okay, so the difference between the two formulas, search and find, is very obvious here. Okay, because as you can see the find formula differentiates between a capital letter and obviously a lowercase letter as well. Okay, so that's why it returns an error, whereas the search formula does not differentiate between a capital or lowercase p here, and that's why it gives us 2. Okay, and now if I just copy the formulas here, what is going to happen is, you can see in the third example now, the find formula will give us a starting position of 12 here for the, because first of all it does not consider the first there because it starts with a capital letter, whereas the search formula, not differentiating between capital and lowercase letters, it starts at position 1. Okay, now the fourth example, you can see the find formula occurs a mistake, an error again, okay, and that is because it does not go into kind of finding wildcards, and that's why it comes up with an error here, whereas for example the search formula, it allows for wildcards as well, okay, and that's why it comes up with position 6. As you can see, the first 1, 2, 3, 4, 5 obviously different, and then after that it goes and it identifies the wildcard here. Okay, now going back to the presentation, what the next thing we have is two formulas, rand and run between, okay, and they're quite useful as well, especially I would say probably the second one. What, let's say, run between does is it returns a number between obviously the number specified, between the numbers specified by the user. So we need to have a bottom and a top number here, okay, whereas rand, it generates random number which is bigger than 0 and obviously smaller than 1. Okay, so let me give you an example, see how the formulas actually work. So run, for example, is going to be in this range, so equals run, and this is what we get here. Okay, so if we type the formula in the other cells as well, we get just random numbers. Okay, for example here now we can specify actually a bottom and a top number. So let's say if we want to get random numbers between 1 and 10, again I've used the comma instead of the semicolon, okay, we get 3 here. So integers, so the difference is that obviously run between returns integer numbers, whereas rand returns purely obviously decimal numbers. Okay, so back to the presentation. We have the next set of formulas, which are obviously int and trunc. So both formulas allow the user to get, let's say, the integer part of a decimal by rounding down, for example. Okay, now trunc will obviously do that as well if you do not specify anything in the optional part of obviously the formula, which is obviously the number of digits. Okay, and what we can do, I can show you now how these two formulas work in practice. So we have these formulas here. Okay, we have the example, sorry, here. Okay, and if we use int, okay, we can let's say select this one and we get 4. Okay, so we always get the integer here. Okay, and trunc, for example, if we do not specify let's say any optional argument here, it will always give us the integer as well. Okay, but if I were to specify, let's say 1, again the colon, it will leave one number after the decimal point. Okay, so this is obviously the difference between the two functions in this case, but as I said, if the optional argument in the trunc function is not used, it will always give you the integer part of the number. Back to the presentation, the next function that we have is mod. So mod is a function that returns the remainder after a number is divided by a divisor, of course. So we need to have the number and we need to have the divisor as well. The example for this is obviously in the spreadsheet as well. I just need to find it. It should be down here. Okay, so here's what we have. Okay, now if we use mod to divide, let's say 10 and 5, we are going to get 0 as mod. Obviously the remainder is 0 because 10 divided by 5 is 2, so there is no remainder. Okay, whereas for example if we go and do that to the second thing, we can see that there is a remainder of 1, and the logic behind it is because 13 divided by 2 is actually 6 with the remainder of 1, and this remainder is actually this formula here. Okay, now just to populate the rest of the cells here in this range as well, we can see 17 divided by 3, 19, 19 divided by 9 as well. They both have remainders of 2. Okay, back to the presentation. The next formula is m round. This is a pretty good formula and I really like it, and you will see why. But first of all, what the formula does is it returns a number to the desired multiple. Okay, and it might sound a little bit confusing at the moment, but you will see what I mean when I give you the example here. Okay, so as you saw from the structure of the formula, the formula should have a number and a multiple here. Okay, so that's why I have two columns here that have numbers, and obviously these are the multiples as well. Okay, so let's start with the first example. So we enter our number here and then the multiple as well. Okay, so what this is going to give us is going to give us 9, because the nearest multiple, the nearest number that is actually divisible by 3 without any remainders is actually 9. Okay, so that's the nearest number to 10, of course. Okay, 12 is also divisible by 3, but 12 is further away from 10 than obviously 9 is from 10. Okay, so based on that logic, you can see now the other examples as well. So here we are going to get 49, because 49 is the nearest number that is divisible by 7 here. Okay, the other number is 42, and the difference is 4. 42 to 46 is the difference is 4, whereas the difference between 49 and 46 is 3. Okay, right. This is, as I said, like, a very useful formula, and it can help you in a variety of situations once you start analyzing data. Okay, back to the presentation. We have another interesting formula here, which you might have heard of as obviously more like a way to paste specific, let's say, data, some data that you have copied, and then obviously you go and, like, you transpose it somewhere else. But this is actually a function that obviously does the same thing really. It converts a vertical range of cells to a horizontal range and vice versa. And the structure of the formula is all we need to do really is like input the array within the brackets of the transpose function. Now I have put a note here as well, as you can see, because this is an array formula. Okay, and in order for the formula to work, we need to enter it with a control plus shift plus enter instead of just enter click. Okay, so I'll show you what I mean. Let me go to the Excel spreadsheet. Okay, now we have the transpose example here. Okay, now first of all, when using this function, we need to make sure that we have selected as many cells as obviously the size of the array that we are going to use. As you can see, we have 4 cells in the vertical array, and now we have selected 4 cells in the horizontal array as well. Okay, so now you start typing the transpose function, okay, and you open the bracket, and we need to obviously specify the array here, okay. Once you close the bracket, now instead of just pressing enter, you need to press Control Shift Enter, and that's what we're going to do here, okay. And this is what we get. We get the same data but in horizontal order rather than a vertical one. And up here you can actually see what the Control Shift and Enter combination does to the formula. It inserts braces here at the beginning and at the end of the formula, okay. Now going back to the presentation, the next formula we have is actually the address formula, okay. Now what this formula does, it creates a cell reference as text given a row and column numbers. So you can see the structure of the formula here, okay. And I will show you what all these different arguments of the structure of the formula actually do, okay. Now going back here, we can just go to the address formula here, okay. Now these are the 4 different obviously options that we can get using the address formula. Let's take an example, obviously cell A1, okay, because obviously that's what we're going to reference here anyway. So if we just type in the address formula, okay, and now I will input for row numbers, I want to input the first row, okay, and then the column number should be 1 as well. So the first row and the first column, so that cell basically is what we are looking for, but instead of the comma, I need to use semicolon again, okay. And now the absolute obviously reference is here, okay. We can choose whether to be whether this should be like an absolute reference, okay. By if we press 1, what we're gonna get is obviously this, which is the same as on the left, okay. So you can see these dollar signs here. It basically means that both the column and the row are actually fixed, okay. Now if we go and change this, we can see that number 2 is absolute row and relative column, okay, which basically means that the column is actually not fixed, but the row is fixed, okay. And the opposite of this is number 3, where we have relative row, absolute column, and this is what we have. The dollar sign is actually before the column A here, okay. And now if we want just a purely relative reference, we can just go and choose number 4, which is going to be A1 without any dollar signs, and this is the relative reference in its entirety, okay. And just going back to the presentation now, the next 2 formulas are actually true and false. So I'm not really sure how often you will actually come across these formulas, or you will obviously need to use them, but they're quite useful as well, okay, especially when you need to put in a specific range, let's say the values of true or the values of false, etc, 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 okay. Now let me give you the example, see how this works. So very simple here, okay. You just type in true and then opening and closing brackets, okay, and we get true here, okay, whereas false is obviously the same, but instead of true we type false and we get false as well. As I said, I'm not really sure how many times you're gonna have to use these 2 formulas, but they're quite useful, especially let's say if you have a range and you want to indicate for example whether all whether there are any let's say blank cells within that range, and obviously if there are, you can, let's say, put true. If there aren't, you can put false, but that again is another matter, of course. Okay, so going back to the presentation, the next formula is a formula which is very frequently used, especially with combination of other formulas as well. Okay, but here I will just show you like how this formula works on its own. Okay, so what it does is it returns a valid reference from a text string. Okay, and the structure of the formula is as it is shown here. Okay, all we need really is a reference text. Okay, and let me just give you an example to show you how this works. So we have put here sheet 1 as the name of the sheet. Okay, that we're going to reference to. Okay, because as you can see, we have sheet 1 here as well, and let me show you that we have a value of 100 in cell A1. Okay, so because we're going to reference that cell. Okay, now if I type in indirect and first of all just go, for example, and do this, and then after that we need to do this, and then we need A1 as the okay, so here we need to put the obviously quotes. Okay, now we will get the value in cell A1 in sheet 1. Okay, as you can see, we got the value of 100. Okay, now it's important, this formula is quite important because we can use it in a combination, let's say, with VLOOKUP when we're trying to VLOOKUP something from another sheet. But if that sheet, let's say, changes a name, or for example there is a deletion, like something has been deleted there, and that is, let's say, part of the range that we have specified within the VLOOKUP formula without using the indirect, what we will probably come across is an error, okay, in the name of the sheet. So that's why we can obviously use the indirect formula. Okay, we will discuss obviously the combination of indirect and other formulas within the next section. Right, going back to the presentation now, we have another formula here which again can help you when analyzing a lot of data, and when you want to actually kind of identify the type of the error, let's say that that has obviously been shown, for example. Okay, and basically what this formula error.type does is it returns a number matching an error value. Okay, the structure is obviously of the formula is all we need to do is just input the cell or the range here. Okay, now going back here, I will show you what I mean by starting to type the formula, and look at this now. So all these different errors, they have a matching number here as well. Okay, so now by writing the errors here on the side and by using this formula, I will get the matching number for that error. Okay, so how does that work? Look at that now. So we need to obviously select K21 in this case, and then close the bracket. Okay, and then we get number 1. So the null error is actually error number 1. Okay, and then we can paste the formula for all the other cells here in this range, and we can actually see what the matching numbers or what the numbers of the respective errors here are. Okay, and with this part 6 of the course is actually done. It is completed. As usual, I would like to leave you with this amazing quote that the repetition is the mother of learning, and it has helped me through a lot of things, really, like learning a lot of things as well over the years as well. And I really hope that you will take the time to go through some of the things that we have already discussed. And if you have any questions, please do let me know in the comment section of this course. I'll see you in the next part of the course.